advise them to be silent. What I would advise, elections matter, voting matters, organizing matters.
If Republicans go to Washington and we don't deliver on what we promised, I think we'll be looking at pitchforks and torches in the street, and quite rightly. And that can't happen.
I think it's good that the president-elect is meeting with people like Mr. Romney. He's meeting with a lot of talented people that are going to be he needs good relationships with. I think Mr. Romney will be quite capable of doing a number of things, but he'll be one of those, I'm sure, that's reviewed. And Mr. Trump will make that decision.
Well, that was really the big news out of today's transition as we watched the elevators at Trump Tower back and forth, that Governor Mitt Romney is going to meet with Donald Trump this Saturday. And some are reporting that he's up for possibly Secretary of State. We don't know that. There are names floating all over the place. Just moments ago, Donald Trump finished up a meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister, Shinzo Abe. That is his first meeting face-to-face with a world leader. And as I mentioned, with the people coming in and out today, it was quite interesting watching Trump Tower. Henry Kissinger, the Japanese Prime Minister we just mentioned, South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, Representative Jeb Hensarling of Texas, Governor Rick Scott of Florida, Safra Catz, the co-chief executive of Oracle, General Jack Keane, who we know very well here, Admiral Mike Rogers of NSA, Ken Blackwell. A lot of folks. Let's bring in our panel, talk about this transition. Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano, Caitlin Huey Burns, national political reporter for Real Clear Politics, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Judge, I guess that's the thing that people looked at and said, wow, Mitt Romney, after all that back and forth in the campaign.
You know, I thought of you and Charles as soon as Mitt Romney's name was mentioned. It's almost like Nixon going to China. I mean, Mitt Romney's blistering attacks, repeated and persistent, on Donald Trump during the campaign were personal, both, well, not in the general election, but certainly in the primary election. I'm of the view that taking a snapshot picture of the transition at any given time is really just going to have us pulling our collective hair out, because it doesn't matter to the country who the president-elect interviews. It just matters who he chooses. I get some of my guidance from our colleague Anthony Scaramucci, who's a member of the executive committee. You ran a nice clip from him the other day. This is very orderly, very businesslike. We don't know if this is the way other administrations did it, because none of us was involved then. But if some of the names that are being touted end up on the cabinet, we might not be getting, for example, at state, the foreign policy changes that Donald Trump promised and on which he was elected. John Bolton, for example, a friend of ours, a person whose intellect I respect, is hardly the let's pull back from our involvement in Europe, let's soften our relationship with Russia that Donald Trump said he was going to give us. In fact, yeah, John would be the opposite of that.
Sure, but obviously the foreign policy and the directives come from the president, and the person follows that. But you're right on the individual feelings of these various issues. I want to put up David Axelrod's tweet, and this was about our point yesterday about the timing. David Axelrod, obviously former advisor to President Obama and his campaign before that. We hadn't made any major appointments at this point in 2008. Lots of reasons to be concerned about real Donald Trump's transition, but the pace of the announcements is not one of them. We hadn't made any major appointments. I don't remember being criticized for it. Caitlin.
Well, one thing to consider with this Trump transition is that, first of all, the Trump campaign didn't necessarily expect to win, and so this provides more of a pressure point in choosing these next folks. The other point is that he ran as an outsider. He ran as a businessman. He ran as someone who will clean up kind of the traditional ways of doing things. So that requires a different kind of vetting process, I think, for some of these folks. To the judge's point, he made lots of promises on foreign policy, on tax policy, and those sorts of things. So using that framework to vet some of these folks is important. The big question I have is whether he is wanting to bring people in who opposed him. Mitt Romney,
team of rivals.
Exactly, a team of rivals, or whether we know Trump is very loyal to that group that's surrounding him right now. Whether he maintains loyalty over rivals remains to be seen exactly.
Yeah, and you know, the definite facts on this are tough to pin down because you have people on the inside throwing names all over the place, and you say they're being considered, but you don't know where the president-elect's head really is. I want to put up this statement about Jeff Sessions from the Trump team. While nothing has been finalized and he is still talking with others as he forms his cabinet, the president-elect has been unbelievably impressed with Senator Sessions and his phenomenal record as Alabama's Attorney General and U.S. Attorney. It is no wonder the people of Alabama re-elected him without opposition. Now, I read into that a couple of things. One, he could be Attorney General. Two, he might stay in the Senate. And he's just saying, hey, he's a great guy, he's amazing, but we're probably not going to give him a spot.
Which is why I think the judge is right, that trying to read the tea leaves here is really quite fruitless. And I think the criticism that the incoming administration has gotten is, as David Axelrod says, slightly unbalanced. That at the same point they had not made appointments, and he said, I don't remember being criticized. It's as if parts of the press who got used to attacking Donald Trump in the campaign and are just itching to start those attacks when he takes office, and I'm sure there will be reason to criticize him. Can't take an interregnum of a month or two off. They're such in the mode, they just have to do it. It's almost reflexive. The guy's putting together a team. Let's see who he ends up with. I think bringing in Romney, whether he gives him a job or not, is quite a signal. That was one of the bitterest attacks on a candidate of one's own party ever, delivered by Romney. And for Trump to bring him in, I think, helps to blunt the sort of the prejudice that people have that he will only stick with loyalists, a small group, outsiders, and the country will be adrift at the beginning because they're going to have to learn everything from the beginning when they come into office. So I thought that was the most important signal of the day. And of course, bringing in Henry Kissinger, he's a visitor of foreign policy. You really can't be sworn into office unless you met Henry Kissinger. I think it's in the Constitution.
He's a true brain on foreign policy. I'm not going to go through the litany, Judge, of the Mitt Romney tweets or the sound bites through the campaign.
Well, Charles is right. It was about as harsh as you can imagine.
But for Donald Trump to get to the point where he's meeting with Mitt Romney and possibly even considering a position, Donald Trump, who does not forget, I'm not sure if he forgives, but he usually remembers somebody who didn't stand with him. That seemed like the news of the day.
And for Mitt Romney to agree to come to Donald Trump, whatever is in Governor Romney's mind, I think it's extraordinary. And perhaps it will show what Donald Trump promised us, and not everyone believed, that once he is elected, you will see a more presidential Donald Trump, a person who can wrap his arms around those who never would have thought they'd want to be in the same room with him.
One person who was running the transition was Governor Chris Christie. Take a listen to this.
I have every intention of serving out my full term as governor. I've said that from the beginning. And I have no reason to believe, as we stand here today, that I will do anything other than serve out my full term as governor.
Boy, it started, he was running the transition, then Mike Pence, the vice president-elect, was put in charge. Now it doesn't seem like Chris Christie is getting perhaps anything.
Right, and it's especially remarkable because Christie was one of the earlier former rivals to come out and endorse Donald Trump and took a lot of his own political capital, sacrificed a lot of his own political capital to do so. Of course, we've seen the reports of the Kushner tension with Governor Christie. We also know that Christie...
Well, just rewind. Jared Kushner is the son-in-law married to Ivanka, and his father was put in jail by then U.S. Attorney Chris Christie.
Very questionable prosecution. Very questionable.
In addition, of course, Christie is facing his own controversies over Bridgegate. And the other thing, though, to remember about Donald Trump is he's someone, as if we take his businesses, he's someone that knows and wants to delegate. So I think that puts extra pressure on some of these picks because these are people who are going to be perhaps more involved than before. Vice President to be Mike Pence is a good example of that. He was on Capitol Hill today meeting with lawmakers. He's going to play a really key role, not only as the traditional liaison to the Capitol, but also in terms of really guiding and governing. He's one of the few people on this team that has that real experience.
Now, maybe Cheney-esque, Charles. It looks like Chris Christie, though, has his own interregnum.
Yes, and look, I mean, his...
I just wanted to use the word again. I just really wanted to use it.
Yeah, I know. In him, I think it's all the more poignant, because remember, it's not just that he was head of the transition team. He was quite obviously running for the number 2 spot on the ticket. So it isn't as if his ambitions began. It wasn't as if he was going to remain the governor of New Jersey through the selection process for number 2. So he got disappointed from the beginning, and this is a man whose political career looks to be at its low ebb. Now, we said that a lot about Trump himself and about many of his associates, so you can't really predict. But if you had to pick somebody you didn't want to be on the transition team right now, it would be Chris Christie.